Has your writing evolved? It appears so to me. From a focus on the arts of literature, if I may put it that way, to it seems your more recent writings have had to do with attack and defense and make your position clear. And for example, your latest book, Interinventions, where you dealt with specific public lies, mentioned names, what they said that was wrong. You corrected history in many instances and so on. I tend to think your writing has evolved from an emphasis on arts to an emphasis on social, cultural, political issues. Is that a right observation? Does that come with time and age?
Let's put it this way. I once called my generation the wasted generation, simply because the hopes, the energy, the excitation that we had and which informed activities at the beginning, all those hopes have been frittering away. And that naturally makes you focus more and more bitterly, very often, on what is wrong. So I'm not surprised that this, I think at the beginning one tended to write generally, in general terms, to say these are the foibles that are observed in humanity, these are in society in particular, these are the ills that I think we can collectively correct, and we can build on past errors. And you see the core of what is positive in your environment dissipating far, far more rapidly than the positives come to take their place. So naturally, one's language becomes somewhat more acerbic, You have the same reprobates recycling themselves and succeeding. In other words, it's as if you never said anything, or whatever you said didn't matter anyway. Just brushed aside. Those who are predators on society have become more and more impudent. They actually bask in impunity. And of course, they lie to cover up their tracks. They lie to deflect criticisms. They lie to discredit, your position and discredit you directly. So I think inevitably one says, wait a minute. I said this in general terms, but you seem to be personally affected, and therefore you want to attack personally. Now let us dissect where you're coming from. Let's dissect what you just said. Let's put it all before the public, and in the kind of language in which there is no ambiguity. That's all that's happened. It's nothing dramatic. That's all that's happened.
In your book, you must set forth at dawn, page 262, actually 262, 263, you had a lot to say about the current President Muhammadu Buhari. Let me read a bit here where you said the answer to that was straightforward. He rode to public favor, talking about President Babangida. He rode to public favor on the brutal and hypocritical record of his predecessor, one devil for whom, in my calculation, no spoon existed long enough to justify the risk even of an impromptu snack. You described him in very harsh words. You described him as somebody you can't even use a long spoon to deal with. Years after, you seem to have changed your position. Before the last election, you preferred him to the other candidates, former President Goodluck Jonathan, and generally you seem to have told people that he's a converted Democrat, to put it that way. What changed?
Not only in that book, but even in the media. Remember, he'd contested before, and he was backed by a number of people whom I considered progressive, and I catalogued all the things, no, not all, but a number of reasons why I felt he should not be elected into any governing position in this country. And at that time, this was quite true, in my estimate, my judgment. But then what happened? First of all, we were left with two contestants, two credible contestants in terms of catchment area for the nation. We had reached, in my view, the bottom. I became convinced that if this country underwent 4 more years under President Jonathan, the country would run aground completely. I looked at the record and said, well, this cannot go on. This has to stop. Then I looked at this man who'd contested election 3 times before, said he wouldn't contest anymore, and then decided to throw his hat in the ring. I talked to people. I said, do you know what you're doing? I'm talking to my colleagues, my collaborators, all the way back to the anti-Abacha days and so on. I said, do you people know what you're doing? And they said, this man has been changing. We've come close to him, we studied him, he's changed. He is, I use the expression, I said, you think there's a genuine born-again Democrat that can emerge from the military? And they said it, yes. And after weighing all the options, I said, well, let's try a new one. And since in electoral terms, he was the one, I guardedly and with reservations, which I announced, said, no, not a continuation under Jonathan. And of course, it wasn't all negatives under Buhari. Largely, it was excess. His problem was excess. I don't like those who throw people in jail without trial, as he did the journalists. I don't like people who say, not only will I not tolerate criticism, I will jail anybody who, virtually, is what he said, anybody who criticized the government. And he made an example of those poor journalists who were just doing their job very honorably. So these were negatives. But now he's saying, maybe this was a mistake. And in any case, this is now a democracy. The same kind of energy I brought to bear during the military era, using military ethos, if you like, I can use the same energy, the same commitment under a democratic dispensation. And so very reluctantly, I want this to be quite clear, and I made it quite clear. I said, I've weighed the two, and I think this nation stands a better chance under Buhari. And we will have the democratic checks on our side. Under the military, we had absolutely no checks. But this time, I say, we'll have the democratic checks. And we know what to do if we find that we're confronted with yet another Abacha. I was convinced he could not be worse than Abacha, first of all. And we survived under Abacha. We fought him to stand still. And I felt that if Buhari deviated, then we'll fight him yet again. And what's been coming out now? Look at all that's been coming out. The figures which virtually hammer one into the ground. Just the sheer enormity of the robbery of this nation that is getting exposed progressively. It shows that we did not make a bad choice.
Mm. So you're quite happy the last 6-7 months of this administration?
Not totally yet.
Sounds like Buhari has proven you right.
Well, Buhari has proven that, yes, there is such a thing called a born-again Democrat.